And I tell other early entrepreneurs all the time, gosh, I know what you're doing right now is really hard, but please look around, enjoy the experience. You're doing something that very few people get to experience. Take photos. When you break through, you're gonna remember this.
Welcome to Divot, the community for people making their mark on the world, where each week I sit down with the greatest minds in business, tech, sports, and entertainment to cover the moments, decisions, and lessons that shape their journey so you can shape yours. Go to divot.org to learn more and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
Divot.
Today, we're at the famed Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, about 45 minutes from Silicon Valley. We're joined by Marc Randolph, a legendary entrepreneur who forever changed how the world watches stories. Marc is the co-founder and first CEO of Netflix, where he took the company from idea to IPO to now being valued at over $500 billion. Before and after Netflix, Marc built, sold, invested, and advised dozens of companies, including Looker, which was eventually sold to Google for more than $2.6 billion. He's also written the best-selling book, That Will Never Work, inspiring entrepreneurs around the globe. Marc's journey is one of resilience and vision. He's heard no hundreds of times navigating the chaos of startup life and personally growing along the way.
Santa Cruz is pretty special. Obviously, it has the ocean, and you can't quite see the ocean, but it's right back there. It has mountains. It has a tremendous amount of green space, and it's right over the mountains from Silicon Valley. But those mountains are an important buffer in that they make the commute really suck. And so as a result, there's lots of people who live here who are not tech bros.
Yeah.
Most of my friends here are not in the business. And having that separation and having that life, which is not totally revolving around startups and tech, and having the ocean and the mountains ended up being like the perfect spot for me.
There is something special about here, having lived on the other side of the mountain for 20 years. We come here every summer. We come literally to this spot at the boardwalk, and there's something it's sort of like going back in time a little bit. When you come to Santa Cruz, it has this special, still has surf beach culture like you can kind of get in Southern California a little bit, but it's not like that at all. There are some really amazing startups that got started here.
Yep.
But it's really, like you said, life doesn't revolve around work.
It's very intentional. And I mean, it's a frustrating place in some senses to live here. Because, for example, if you want to do anything to your house, God forbid, trying to get through the planning department. Yeah. But that's purposeful. That 17, which is the highway that connects this to the valley, is brutal. And that's purposeful why it's not improved and made faster and easier. All those things go into trying to hold on to that culture of it being a more relaxed place to live, so that the houses along the ocean are not huge McMansion houses, but are still kind of surfy feeling houses. It's pretty cool. It's one of my failures. You mentioned all the startups that have been started here, but it was probably one of my big failures at Netflix was that we couldn't keep it here. I mean, it was started here. And the intention was, if I'm going to start a company, let's do it where I live.
Yeah.
After years of commuting over the hill to the valley. And at the time, I was not experienced or savvy enough in fighting those forces that I could prevent it from being sucked over the hill like almost every other startup that starts here. And then later, we jump ahead to this later, but when we did Looker, the whole idea was, okay, we're smarter now. We know what it'll take to keep it here.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been very, very difficult 25 years ago to have a company this close to Silicon Valley, not actually be right in the heart of it, and with talent and people that were living there. And now everything's really shifted up north to San Francisco, and you kind of had Palantir sort of suck up all the energy right in the center, in the heart of Silicon Valley, and then all starts, you couldn't get space, and they all left, and young people want to live in the city, and so But yeah, there are some great companies that are happening here. And one thing interesting about California, which you kind of remind me of, and a lot of people, as I'm thinking about it, that I've talked to through Divot and in other ways, they're transplants of this area, including myself. I'm not from here. And when I moved here, I literally knew no one. And I don't know. I don't know if that's really unique to this area or if that happens everywhere, but I feel like the majority of the people that I meet in successful roles didn't start here, didn't come with a network. Like they came, they met a few people, they got help along the way, and they're kind of just part of what makes this whole stretch in the Bay Area really special. Just sort of accepted in as you're part of the family.
Yeah, I think it's very, very true. And I mean, no one's from here. There was no tech industry here 50 years ago. I mean, so everything has come from scratch. And so, yeah, if that's I don't know if this is dangerous to say, that's diversity in the true sense of the word, which is bringing people together of different experiences, different backgrounds, different ways of thinking, and that creates very magical things. And that certainly is one of the things which happened here in the Valley.
When I read what you write and I see how you talk online or in your book, it's like I'm having a private conversation with you. How were you always like that? Is that something that you decided at some point to kind of just be more open and I would say honest?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't constructed. In other words, I didn't design a persona for myself. And so in some ways, it absolutely is always the way that I've been. And in many ways, it's why Reed Hastings and I got along so well, which is both of us were like that, which is this feeling that life is too short to shade the truth. And we should be able to say anything we want to each other. Certainly a lot of what you see now is the fact that I'm older and don't have a lot to prove anymore. And I'm fine being who I am. And also this kind of feeling, if there is an intentionality about it, it's that there's so much bullshit written about startups and Silicon Valley and all these books about, basically the subtitle is, look how smart I was.
Right.
And I go, no, it's so damaging to create this impression that the startup world is glamorous and easy. It's hard, and parts of it really suck. And part of my responsibility is to say, here's what it really is like. And that requires being open about the disappointments and the painful things and the hard things you have to do. So I'm not sure where it came from, but it certainly feels good.
You seem to be uniquely optimistic as well. And you've been through some hard stuff. Yeah. So where does that come from?
I've always been like that. I mean, in some ways, one of the superpowers is this unbelievable optimism, which is the sense that I'm not going to get it right on the first try, but I'm eventually going to figure it out. But a lot of it also comes from how I've never set success as the objective. Like being drawn into entrepreneurship was never about having a big company or about being famous or being rich or any of that stuff. It was just this interest in interesting problems and figuring things out. And that's always delivered for me. And it delivers for me even if from the outside, the venture doesn't work. The thing that I wanted out of it, I got out of it, which is this really cool experience of getting to experiment and try things and work with really interesting people. I think a lot of the optimism comes from that. I'm almost every aspect of it. I generally enter into every engagement with a person believing they have good intentions. And my experience is you get hurt so infrequently, it's so worth it to make yourself vulnerable to someone. I don't know, it's just a way of being.
It's sort of easy to say, but I find it really hard to do, especially in the midst of like really hard things. And I'm in my early 40s, young kids, and the ups and downs of career and things not working out the way you hope they do, and the plan that you lay out doesn't actually come to pass. How can I sort of move through those really difficult waves where I'm getting pummeled and come up out of the water smiling, or at least able to keep going?
So you picked a great analogy actually there. So I do a ton of outdoor stuff. That's been my happy spot for all my life, whether it's mountaineering or, backcountry skiing or mountain biking or surfing or kayaking. That's my thing. And there's a thing that certainly my family and I talk about it. It's really called type 2 fun, which are things which are not necessarily fun in the moment, but they're absolutely look back at them and go, oh my God, that was awesome. I mean, the example you gave is a perfect one about being pummeled. I mean, you go surfing, and especially when you're young, you get crushed and tumbled and water goes up your nose. And that's by no means pleasurable. But the feeling of being out in the ocean and catching a wave and riding those things is tremendous. And you learn over time to accept that that's the nature of it. I mean, climbing, there's some peaks that I've done that are multi-day climbs, and they're absolute sufferfests. But you have these sublime moments where you all of a sudden the sun comes up and you're above the clouds and you're going, oh my God, this is the most magical thing ever. And it was associated with the last 18 to 20 hours of suffering. And in some ways, work and life has a very similar aspect to it. When I look back on the Netflix story, or look back at any of the startups I've done, the parts that I remember most vividly, and in some ways the most fondly, are the ones where it was the darkest, where it was desperate and we were all gathered around going, we are in such deep right now. And had to rally and call forth everything we had to try and get through it. That's the part that I look back on and go, God, that was fun. And so I think what happens is, again, I've been doing this for a long time.
You've seen the cycles.
Yeah. It's like my kids, when I desperately, as a parent, only could, so wanted them to get the same enjoyment out of being out in the woods that I did. And for a little kid, hiking uphill, I mean, awful. And so you've got to be really careful about those first couple of trips are short and easy and come with M&Ms. And you get to see them an hour later on the top of some little peak with a view. And you can almost see their heads going, oh, that was so fun. And talking about to the mom how fun that was later on. And so for me, as an entrepreneur of 40 years of it, the first times you do it, you think, why does anyone want to do this? And all of a sudden you get the break and it works. And little by little, those things add up to the same thing, where you go, this too shall pass. And in the long haul, I know I'm going to look back fondly. And I tell other early entrepreneurs all the time, gosh, I know what you're doing right now is really hard, but please look around. Enjoy the experience. You're doing something that very few people get to experience. Take photos. When you break through, you're gonna remember this.
You're living in the good old days.
Is that what I'm telling them, or you're telling me this?
I mean, that's how I think about it. It's like I have to really pound it in myself sometimes. Of hey, you're living in the good old days right now.
Yes.
You need to and
that's exactly it.
You uniquely, you co-founded Netflix, took it to IPO. It's become a $500+ billion company. You co-founded another company that sold to Google for billions of dollars. When you think about these successes, that moment where the transaction happened and it was, we made it, IPO, or we made it, we sold to Google. Do you spend most of your time when you think back thinking about those moments, or is it the beginning? Is it the messy middle part? Where does it go?
Because those moments are extremely anticlimactic. And it's funny because you kind of held out this IPO as oh my God, that's going to be it. But in many ways, as you're getting closer, it's like one of those peaks where it begins to round off at the top. And you're just kind of, you go, now I know we're going to make it. Yeah, maybe something bad's going to happen between here and there, but unlikely. So it's a little bit of an anticlimax when it happens. And so absolutely, that's not the part that you reflect back on and go, gosh, look what we did. It's the earlier part. But I'm thinking about your question about, is it the early stages? And I don't think I define it that way. It's very much this up and down. Because in some ways, when you're small, the disappointments are small because that's all you really have. When you're big, you're risking so much more. And so those disappointments are big. So it's all the same.
When you originally started Netflix, you looked at a number of different ideas and were trying different solutions to problems that you have. What ultimately made you say, this is the problem that I really want to work on?
It's funny. I'm going back and forth in my head about to what degree it's logic and what degree it's emotion. And I think it's a combination of the two of those things. There's a huge amount of logic involved in it. And the thing I can dispel is that this is not a childhood dream. I'm not a movie guy. I mean, maybe now I am, but I was absolutely not a movie guy then. So it is not like I've always dreamed about movies and, who's your favorite cinematographer? I watched Lion King 100 times, like most people my age at that point. That moment for Netflix anyway was really, like I said, kind of the early ages of the internet. And what intrigued me about the internet, the thing that I saw in it, was an extension of what I'd spent the previous 10 years doing, which was direct marketing. I was a direct marketing guy. I did direct mail, I did catalogs, I did magazine circulation, did direct response TV. And when I saw the internet come along, I went, oh my God, this is direct marketing on steroids. The things I could do with this tool. And so one criteria was this thing has to be e-commerce. And back then, pretty much Amazon was really the big player, only player doing e-commerce, but showing you could do it. So I go, it's got to be e-commerce. So there was that logical piece. But also because I was at that point, 38, and I'd already done a whole bunch of other startups, I did have practical criteria. I want something which actually has margins. I want something which is operationally complex, that it's defensible. I want a big category, so I have lots and lots of tolerance for making mistakes. I had a number of things like that. But once I had gotten those basic things in place, when Reed and I were brainstorming, ideas, and I was pitching him ideas, they were all over the place. That I was applying those, personalized sporting goods, personalized shampoo, custom dog food, vitamins, all of which seem completely dissimilar, but they were all big categories, could be driven through personalization, which is what I saw as the internet's big strength back then. Were e-commerce ready. And I was just looking for the right one. And the one we ultimately settled on was, doing video rental by mail, which was, everyone said that'll never work. That's why the book is called That Will Never Work. But, of course they were right. It was a ridiculous idea. It didn't work, but it was a starting point. So you get into it, and all of a sudden you're intrigued by how am I going to figure out how to take this weird category and bring it online.
I think I read this story. Basically, you and Reed are commuting from here over the mountains.
Yeah.
And because you're working in another company and you're kind of talking about, you're bringing ideas weekly, daily, and then you kind of have this moment where you kind of put together this idea with the DVDs, which there at the time, there's like hundreds of thousands of DVD players. It's a small, tiny market. And you kind of realize that you can put these in the mail.
Yep.
And they're not going to get ruined or something. How did that happen?
So You're right. That's the setup for the story, is that Reed and I were both, his company had bought my previous startup. So we'd all gone to earn out at that company. Most of our company that he had bought, had been consigned to the basement as a business unit to run that product. And I ended up getting sucked into being VP of corporate marketing. So going from this really cerebral 12-person company and boom, big multinational company. But anyway, the big upside besides the economic stuff of selling the company was that I was going to work directly for Reed, and he and I both lived here in Santa Cruz and began commuting to work together. And then that went on about 6 months, and then an even bigger company bought our company. And so maybe the lucky part of the story is both Reed and I were being let go. You have some euphemism, made redundant or whatever the word for it. And Reed was going to go back to school, get a higher degree education, change the world. I'm going, this is great, I'll start my next company. But because we were commuting all the time, we were kind of brainstorming it, and Reed wanted to keep his hand in the entrepreneurial world, and he says, well, we agreed we'd start a company that he would be the angel investor, I'd start and run it, and we needed the idea. And the process we used was basically every morning Reed would swing by my house, about 3 or 4 miles that way. And I'd get in the car, and by the time we'd even left the driveway, I'd be all set. And I go, okay, Reed, I got one for you. Personalized shampoo. People are going to cut off a lock of their hair, and they're going to mail it to us, and we're going to have a team of ace hair scientists who are going to formulate a custom blend just for you, and they're going to subscribe to it. And
Are you in marketing?
yes, my background's all in marketing. And then Reed would just be sitting there staring out the window like he hadn't heard me. And I'd be sitting patiently back, because I knew that what was going on back there, the spinning wheels and the costs and opportunities and risks and benefits and all that stuff. And then eventually, it might take 5 minutes, he'd turn and go, that's never going to work. And here's why. And he'd lay into me with all the logic of why it was a crappy idea. And I'd come right back and we'd argue for
The rest of the ride.
and maybe all the way home.
Yeah.
I really did pitch him personalized shampoo, and I did pitch him custom dog food, and I did pitch him vitamins, and I did pitch him sporting goods. I pitched probably 50, 60, 70 ideas, and one of them that I pitched was video rental by mail. This was, though, in 1997. So video rental back then was VHS cassettes. So we probably had gotten just barely over the top of 17 before that one got rejected straight out.
Because just the costs around sending VHS tapes and just still way too much.
And, one of my previous startups was a big mail order company called Mac Warehouse. And one of the things we pioneered at Mac Warehouse was next day delivery, being able to order it and have it delivered next day. But we were selling computer supplies with huge margins and high ASPs. But I knew tons about using express services to do that type of things. And so that was the genesis of the pitch. And the research goes, no, these are too heavy and too expensive and too fragile to have any margin in video rental and VHS set. So that got shot down. And the breakthrough, if there was one, was maybe a month and a half later. And I began to pitch something, and Reed cut me off and said he had just read about this new tech called a DVD, little disc. And he was going, we should talk about the video rental by mail idea. And began brainstorming that and kind of realized, well, maybe rather than having to use DHL or FedEx, maybe we can mail this sucker. And then turned the car around mid-commute, halfway over the hill, and drove back down to Santa Cruz. We could have done this, filmed this in front of the Santa Cruz post office as a historical moment. But went downtown, tried to buy a DVD. And of course, it was still in test market, and I don't know why they hadn't picked Santa Cruz as a test market, so there wasn't one available. So we bought a used music CD, and then went 2 doors down to a little Santa Cruz pitch store called Paper Vision. Bought a little envelope, gift card, greeting card envelope, put the CD, mailed it to Reed's house. Got to his house in less than a day. Intact. Next morning, picked me up. There it was. Made it to his house for the price of a postage stamp. And I think that's the moment we kind of said, wow, this changes things and maybe this is the one to do. So long story to how that one became the one we picked.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the characteristics of being an entrepreneur is having the capacity to make a decision based on incomplete or inconclusive or contradictory data. And you dig in a little bit trying to understand video rental by mail, what's involved, and pretty soon you realize there's just no amount of analysis is going to tell you whether this is going to work or not. And the only way we're really going to figure out whether this will work or not is by doing it. And so Reed wrote a check. I hired a bunch of people. We rented a old bank office up in Scotts Valley, California, just a little bit north of here, and spent about 6 months putting together the type of website you could probably build in an hour.
You knew that Blockbuster was this, everybody knew Blockbuster in the 90s. It's like one of the most iconic brands of the 90s, I feel like. And we all had that experience, the joy of Blockbuster and also the intense frustration of all sorts of things, not just the late fees, but even, I remember as a kid going in and just being devastated that they didn't have the new movie. You know, they would have these walls, right, of like all the new movies. And then if you didn't get there in time on Friday, you were just out of luck. And then you had to pick some thing you'd already watched or whatever. Right. You had to wait in line 20 minutes to get some movie you'd already seen. Did you actively think about, hey, when you talked about finding a big market, did you actually say, oh, well, I know Blockbuster has so much revenue. I also know that people are frustrated by this sort of video rental experience that they're having today? Or did you not connect all of those dots in the beginning?
No, obviously you connect all those dots. And so you're right. What excites you is an $8 billion category dominated by one player. I think they had 60% of the market, 70% of the market. I mean, they were $6 billion. So I guess that's 75% of the market. But they had vulnerabilities. And one is exactly what you said, is that people disliked the experience. They hated late fees. It was really hard to find a movie. There were structural problems, which is in a physical store, you can only inventory something in one place. So do you put it under Hitchcock, under H? Do you put it under Mystery? Do you put it under Jimmy Stewart? I mean, would you put it classics? You got to pick one. And so finding that movie is really hard. Whereas, of course, in an online store, you can have it in all 4 of those categories. You can have it in 50 categories at once. You make discovery so much better. But the fundamental reason we believe we had a shot was structural, which is bricks and mortar's vulnerability is that they own bricks and mortar, that they have all of these physical stores. So as you alluded to, there was probably 200,000 DVD players in the United States at the time we launched. So that basically meant that every Blockbuster store might have 3 or 4 people in the catchment area for that store who owned a DVD player. So they're not going to stock DVD. They're not going to go in and get 2 or 3 copies of every single DVD to satisfy 2 people. Whereas a centralized store online, we could have everything. So we could be very, very profitable with 250,000 customers. And we knew that dynamic would take years to shift. It would take a long time before there was enough people in a given neighborhood for Blockbuster to enter the DVD market. So we would have the DVD business all to ourselves for a while.
You mentioned getting profitable, which seems like something, thankfully, many startups are talking about now for a while. It's kind of ebbs and flows. It goes out of favor and then it comes back. It's a very capital intensive business. mean, you have physical DVDs, you're paying the studios, you have to pay someone to mail these things. So did you see a path to profit? Was that something that was important early on, or that you thought this could actually make money someday in the near future? Or was it kind of like, hey, it's so capital intensive, we just got to invest?
It was a different time. And yes, eventually we knew we had to make money at this. But the play here was it was going to be at scale, and we knew that it was going to be at scale. And it might take us years to get to the type of scale where we could run this business profitably. And at the bottom line is that the market was accustomed to paying $3 or $4 a night for a movie. And we had to figure out how to amortize the cost of the DVDs and to pay the postage and the packaging and all of our other, and do it for the expectation of less than $4 a rental. We knew it was possible, but that was going to require a huge scale. And it took a tremendous amount of capital. I mean, $100+ million of investment. But at the time, it was a different world. And in some ways, it was similar to the way it feels now with AI. For example, you look at self-driving, the investment in self-driving cars. You go, gosh, how many hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars investment go into that business? But the market is essentially every single
car in the world.
Car in the world. And I think that was the feeling in some ways about the internet, which is that this is going to change everything, and that the winners are going to be phenomenally successful. And it's worth taking pretty big swings at it.
This idea that, as you title your book, that will never work. When you think of that phrase, who specifically, or which person that you pitched comes to mind most?
Well, this is going to be like a Academy Awards acceptance speech. Let me pull out the list. No, because virtually every single person that I pitched that idea to told me the same thing. That'll never work. Certainly the investors told me that will never work. Potential employees told me never work. Friends and family told me that'll never work. My wife thought it was the stupidest idea she'd
all your
she'd
ideas.
ever.
Like, what about the shampoo idea?
Yeah,
Can we go back
that
there?
ridiculous. I mean, I'll be quite honest. I would be nervous if someone goes, "Oh my God, that's brilliant," because that probably means they haven't thought very deeply about it. So you're looking for people to tell you it's a bad idea and why it's a bad idea, because what you're trying desperately to do is make sure you've covered all the angles. You check them off. Yeah. Oh yeah, I know about that one. I knew about that one. I knew about that objection. What's scary about somebody turn over the rock and there's something oh my God.
Holes everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, everyone I pitched that idea to told me it was a bad idea. And all those objections kind of centered around two different things. One, of course, was Blockbuster, like we alluded to, because people couldn't imagine in what world would somebody rent a movie by mail when I can throw a rock and hit a Blockbuster store. I mean, there was 9,000 stores,
Right.
60,000 employees. It was a big company. But that one I go, okay, I understand those risks. The other big objection, that will never work, was DVDs versus digital. Big difference between VHS tape. And the world was just recovering from something which your older viewers may recognize as Napster, which was the birth of digital music, which did not go so well for the music industry.
Sure.
Because piracy was rampant. And so there was this lot of concern that
With licensed content and sort of traditional
yeah.
Hollywood music, you'll never be able to make this work.
And more, they thought what would happen was the same thing that kind of happened, which is digital media. It's just a matter of weeks before everyone's downloading movies or streaming movies. And then who cares about discs?
Yes.
And that was also a very legitimate concern. And in fact, we knew it was true. And what we discounted was when. we were actually quite cynical that it would happen in a matter of weeks. We were cynical it would happen in a matter of years. It would take a while.
I know whenever I have these, feel like I have this amazing idea and you just kind of want to get it out and you want to get feedback, and you almost crave people to sort of reinforce that your idea is good. And you get this feedback of people saying, this won't work. What I've found over the years, and now I learned the hard way, is like, it's now no longer about what is this random person's opinion or this random person's opinion, but it's really about customers. And I found even with investors, if I got customer feedback, whenever I would sit in a pitch and they'd be like, I don't think that'll work, and be like, and now with all these recording sales calls and Zoom and Gong and everything, it's like, well, let me just play to you what a customer says. And you can see somebody go from, I don't get it, to almost like, I have to get it, because that they found someone that's contradicting what I think.
Yeah.
And I've heard you talk about this too, of like, it's like, get out and talk to people, and get out and get in front of customers and see what they're going to pay, and tweak your business model. And, don't, get out of your lab or get out of your room and your office and go see what the market's going to say about it.
Oh, it's so completely true that that's almost all that counts at the beginning. That, I wouldn't discount talking to other people who are professionals, because they will see it a different way. They'll go, oh, there was a company that did this 2 years ago, and you should dig into them. There'll be someone who goes, I have unique insights into what direction the digital media industry is going. Or someone, in my case, in the DVD business, I know what's happening with what we're trying to do to support this platform, which will give you comfort that DVDs are going to make it where Laserdisc didn't. So there is room for professional judgment, but the most important judgment, as you said, is the person who's actually going to consume it, because that the beta name for Netflix was Kibble, like the dog food, because that's always been one of my maxims, which is it doesn't make a difference how good you pitch it if the dogs ultimately eat the dog food. You have to have something people want, and the only way to know if they're really going to want it, especially if you're doing something that's never been done before, is by trying to create a facsimile of putting it really in front of them and see if they eat it. Going up to your friends and go, what do you think? They're going to all go, I love it. And then you have to then follow up with, say, awesome, it's $30. Can you pay me now?
Right.
And then you'll see the furious backpedaling. Or they'll go, absolutely.
Their eyes change, their eyes dilate.
Right, so you've got to make it real, as close to real as you can. Sign up for this in advance. Will you pre-commit? Can I have your credit card number? Anything that allows you to create the facsimile of real engagement. I mean, a while ago when we were kind of riffing through other ideas, we were basically going into, and that wasn't Squarespace at the time, but one of those sites and creating fake companies and then driving traffic to them and then trying to capture people's sign up on the next page. And when they did, we'd say,
there's something here.
Yeah, and we'd tell them, like, for example, here's a weird example from the past. And in long form, I can tell these stories.
Absolutely.
So one of my previous startups was, I mentioned, a mail order company, but before that, there was a magazine we started. It was Mac User Magazine, still around. And we knew we wanted to do a Mac magazine, but we had no idea what the right focus should it be. Should it be the graphics and design? Should it be education? Should it be, there's a lot of ways to position this thing. And creating a magazine is very expensive because you've got to commission all the articles and all the photography and all the, and so what we did instead was mocked up fake versions of 6 or 7 different approaches, including the images of the full page spreads and the covers and samples of the beginning articles, and did mail order pieces for all of these. And did the mail order pieces and saw who got subscribed to and who didn't, and then picked the one that had gotten the most subscriptions and created that one, went to the other 6 and said, we've changed and we'd love to switch you over. But in other words, we did it by actually putting a version of reality in front of people to see how they responded in real scenario. That's an old world example.
Yeah.
Now you can do what took us months. Now you can do it in minutes, but it's the same concept. Another one we did was and I didn't do this, or I did do this, but I pushed people to do it more. And I call it, the Starbucks test, which is basically for the price of buying someone a coffee, you can probably get 15 minutes of their time. And what you'll do is basically go grab people at Starbucks and say, hey, I'd love to buy you your coffee if you'll just let me show you what I'm working on.
It's a really cool idea.
Bring them back to the table, bring it up, and they may not be, it has to be obviously a general consumer product, but you're not going to get them to sign up, but you're going to see where they're confused. You're going to see where their eyes open up. You're going to see where they nod and where they nod this way. It's a really interesting engagement thing. I worked through a series of marketing jobs, and what I would always make sure I did was spend time in customer service. I'd try and spend a day, a month, sitting and taking calls, because you just
Even as a leader.
yeah. Just because you get to hear what people's really bothering them. Yeah. And then you can also say, listen, thanks, I hear what you're saying. Give a second, I want to run something by you. Yeah. And it's incredibly a valuable tool. These are all techniques for getting yourself in front of people and getting your product idea in front of people and seeing what they say.
And when you're that honest and open with people, you also create a fan customer for life a lot of times, because they're like, wow, this person's like deeply cares. And if you're the founder or you're in the early team, it's like they built this connection with what you're working on that they would never get if they were just a user instead of talking to actually the people that made it.
Yeah, it's this surprise and delight, or unreasonable hospitality, whatever term you want to use for it. I mentioned before earlier about the mail order company and how we were kind of really pioneering this next day delivery thing. So the promise, of course, is next day delivery, but you can't get 100%. It's really hard. You have inventory problems, your inventory is out of alignment, and you've committed something weird happens where an address gets rejected. And what we had is a group of people who every day at about 5 o'clock would do one of two things. If the product was out of stock, they'd get in their car and drive around trying to find it and buy it at full retail. And then we'd sell it, we'd ship it to them to make sure we were trying to hit 100%. But the real piece that was cool was for the handful of people we didn't, we would call them that night and explicitly say, listen, I got to apologize. I know we committed overnight delivery. We couldn't make it happen. And here's what we're going to do. It's going to be free, and you're going to get it the day after. But it's going overboard on creating those customers for life by amazing people.
How did you come up with the business model for Netflix? This is way, way, way before subscriptions. We're now just inundated with subscriptions, but you started doing the subscription model when it's sort of an unheard of time. Why did you do that?
Yeah, I'm actually reasonably proud of that. I mean, certainly Netflix is kind of probably best known. We changed the way movies are made and movies, entertainment's consumed. But the subscription thing was pretty big, because you're right. At the time, subscriptions was for the most part magazines and record and tape clubs, book of the month club. But video rental subscription, what the hell is that? It's also perhaps the biggest, I won't call it a mistake, missed opportunity on my part. So I mentioned before that my whole prior career before the internet came along was as a direct marketing guy. And I said, we did catalogs, I did direct response TV, did a lot of direct mail, did magazine circulation, which is subscription. And I own 2 magazines where I was a subscription wizard, if I can get modest about it. And the subscription at Netflix happened for about a year and a half, almost 2 years after we started. And in retrospect, I go, and that was what ended up working. And in retrospect, I go, how could I have missed that? That's where it came from, was it, I knew about how to make that work. And so we were kind of getting to the end of our rope, and Reed and I were debating what else can we do to try and make.
Funding wise, you're running out of money, hard to raise at that time.
Yeah, and just having tried so many things to try and make this economically work. And that one of those last ideas we had was basically, can we make it a subscription program? And, I won't get geeky about it, but like there's a concept called negative auction, which is basically hit first month free, but if I don't hear from you, I'm just going to bill you for the second month.
That wasn't being done before.
Well, it was done in the magazine business all the time.
Yeah.
But
not in software.
Not in software.
Yeah.
And so I had to really do a lot of convincing. Plus all the other economic calculations that what subscription opened up, and now of course SaaS is like so everywhere that it's obvious to them. But the whole concept of spending more to acquire a customer than they give you up front, that's the most economically boneheaded thing I can imagine. Look at this. You're going to get $19.95 from them in the first month, but you want to spend $50 to acquire them? What the hell? But subscription empowers that. Once you begin to gain confidence in your retention, and once you know
your average revenue per user makes that a no-brainer.
Yeah, and not just a no-brainer, a mathematically defensible no-brainer. Here's what the retention curves look like. Here's what the lifetime value calculations look like. Here's what the margins on that lifetime value look like. What world wouldn't I want to spend $50 for someone who's going to generate $250 in the first year?
Yeah.
And that powers huge amounts of capital investment, of acceleration. It was an extremely powerful thing. But of course, because it was alien to most people, having someone who had come from that world had the intersection of internet and mail order and magazine circulation, we made it work. And I think Netflix and probably Salesforce, probably two of the biggest innovators in how you make that happen.
I sort of see it as like a 1-2 punch, and it's like great startups or ideas that get to market and are well executed. It can kind of stun an incumbent. It kind of, like you said, like with Blockbuster, they had all these other things that made it so like, that's not, we're not worried about that. But after a while, you get big enough that it's like you have to start taking notice. They don't really knock it out. But then if a company can come with a different business model to this old sort of like solving this old problem, it's for them to totally reinvent their business model is almost preposterous, because you have to completely abandon what you have, and you have this really great thing. And you see so many businesses try to do this, and they try to pivot into this new thing, and very, very few are able to do the like, hey, I've innovated on the idea and I'm completely disrupting myself with the business model. And you've said this, if you are unwilling to disrupt yourself, there will always be someone willing to disrupt your business for you. And it feels like that sort of 1-2 of great idea executed well, and then totally changing the business model is like the ultimate disruption.
Yeah, entrepreneurship is this combination of short-term tactical execution paired with clever long-term vision. You've got to be building towards something. It's hard enough to get there, so you better spend most of your time on what's right in front of you. But you've got to be saying, are we building something which is ultimately going to allow us to defeat the existing manner of how people are consuming this good or service? And you're right, we looked at Blockbuster And our initial strategy of getting in, pretty solid. We knew we had a few years, but we knew eventually they'd respond. And so you had to really say, what are we doing that we're of a very, very hard time responding to? And you begin looking at things like, what's their dependence on late fees? Very high. What's their dependence on the small percentage of their customers who are high consumers? And you don't need to take away half their customers to tip a Blockbuster single store out of economic balance. You just got to take away the top 7 or 8%. Wow. When all of a sudden that store is unprofitable. So it's on a much shakier foundation than it may seem once you really understand what you're going for. And you say, I've got to aim for those weak spots. And large companies aren't stupid. They're run by extremely smart people. And you've got to aim not for things they won't think about. You've got to aim for things that are extremely difficult for them to change. I mean, a classic one is like, when Burger King was going after McDonald's, they did broiling versus frying, because every single McDonald's fried their hamburgers, and also Burger King's putting in broilers, which taste better. That's really hard to compete with. And that's a stupid example. I did I thought courage. I was working with a company, big manufacturer, manufactured a product that was sold through multi-tier. This company sold to distributors sold to stores sold to consumers. So of course the price gets knocked up each step.
Yeah.
Great product, dominates the market. A smaller company comes along, creates a product similar, not as good, but close, but sells direct. So it's about half the price. And the CEO of this big company goes, oh, not a big deal. We can knock them out immediately. So we'll just set up our own direct-to-consumer division. Better product, match the price, or even slightly higher, end of story. And as soon as word gets out that they're doing direct-to-consumer, their VP of sales comes in, goes, what are you doing? You're making my job harder? Well, I'm not going to work with a company which is undercutting me. No, thank you. I'm out of here. And then the two top biggest distributors go, you're going to compete with me? Fine, we'll take our business elsewhere. And of course, no, we'll wait.
Yeah.
And you wait and you wait and you wait. And pretty soon that little company gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So it's not that you don't know what to do. It's you've got to recognize that by doing it, you're going to go through a big dip. You are going to lose your two biggest distributors. You're going to lose your top 3 or 4 best salespeople. And you've got to be willing to go through that valley of death.
To reinvent everything.
And most companies, especially public companies, don't have the courage to do that because they can't take the hit. But quite frankly, consumers could about your distributors. Yeah. And they could care less about your top salespeople. They're going to go, who can give me a great product, a great service at a great price? And if you're unwilling to disrupt your business sufficiently to do that, I'm not going to think twice about it. I'll just buy over here. And that happens over and over and over again. And it's what makes the engine work. It's what makes startups who are these little vulnerable baby chicks able to survive in the wild. It's because there are big vulnerabilities in a big company.
I wanted to talk about, you've started and been part of dozens of startups, both that you were the founder of, that you were part of, that you've advised and invested in. But one of the other incredible companies that you helped start was Looker. Could you just tell us a little bit about what is Looker? What was the original problem you were solving, and sort of what got you go from sort of consumer-based Netflix to this very B2B SaaS sort of juggernaut with Looker?
So the meta story here is that you never quite know where products are going to go or what they want to become. And you cannot have a predefined vision of what they are, what they're going to become. They grow up to be what they grow up to want to be. And the genesis of Looker was with a really good friend of mine, a guy named Lloyd Tabb, brilliant engineer. One of those, at his time in his career, kind of an eccentric kind of guy, all the way down to riding the unicycle around in the office. And he was a guy who basically laid golden eggs. And the people who laid golden eggs, it's like everyone sees them in the office walking around and they're going, what? Why is there a chicken in the office? And every day the chicken just walks around the office, doesn't appear to do anything. And then one day the chicken stops and does this, and out pops this massive golden egg. And everyone goes, holy shit, a golden egg. Now I see why. And Lloyd was like that. He would just come lean over someone's shoulder and go, what are you doing here? And oh my God. Huge impact. And at a bunch of companies. And he has had this thing. He does languages and he does analytics languages. And he'd had this idea for a new analytics tool that he would really transform how analytics was done. And Lloyd, and I'm sorry, Lloyd, but he had, for the most part, had been doing this genius work as an individual contributor, very, very senior engineering talent. And he had this idea and he goes, this is a great idea for a company. This should be a company. And he goes, and I want to be the CEO this time. And he's a smart guy. And he goes, but I need help. So I need you to mentor me and help me make sure I'm a good CEO. And of course, the reason you want to be CEO is, of course, after years of being in the engineering organization, you realize how easy it is and how all the dumb decisions that CEOs make. And of course, he'll do it right. But he goes, we a deal. I go, okay, I'll help you. And I'll come in a bunch of days a week. We'll work together on this. And then, of course, after about 6 months, Lloyd's going, why would on earth would anybody want this job? This is horrible. There's no obvious, there's no clear right answer. Whatever I do, someone's going to be upset about it. And he goes, so you need to step in here. And so quickly, my job became, we called it ABC, which was anything but coding. So Lloyd went to do what he was doing amazingly well, which was basically building this product, and I was doing everything else. Yeah. That's how we got into it. So Looker is an analytics tool that was a modern analytics tool. So the interface was a web-style interface, so it was very easy to use. And it solved a lot of persnickety problems that most analytics tools had. And the big one, not to get too geeky, and you can cut all this out if it gets too geeky, is that there's usually never any single source of truth in an organization. Because people might ask, give me a report on our best sellers for last week. Well, what best sellers changes constantly. And so if you compare the bestseller lists from 3 weeks, do you mean every week is going to be the same set of bestsellers or the best sellers for that week? Wait, what's a week? Does that end on Sunday at midnight? What time zone? And all of a sudden, no one could agree on the numbers. And what Lloyd did is built a language that began to standardize those functions. So you could simply do a query which said, bestsellers, and it was defined what bestsellers was. Last week was defined. Anyway, it is really, really powerful. And when we started it, we want a lifestyle business. We want a business we can kind of run from our houses here in Santa Cruz, handful of people. It'll be like, Dropbox, where you come on to sign up and there's the $99, $149, $199, best offer, big arrow. That's it. And that's what we wanted it to be. That's not what the product wanted to be. It quickly began to evolve to be a very, very powerful corporate analytics tool, which little by little became more and more powerful and wasn't being sold for $99 a month. It's being sold for could be $99,000 a month. And so all of a sudden, income people who had to wear suits and carried briefcases.
Sell to big enterprises.
Yeah, big SDR organizations, big SEs, the whole thing. And so, yeah, that ended up being a very, very different experience than selling DVD rental by mail or streaming packages.
I mean, the company ends up getting bought by Google for just under $3 billion. And you start this sort of global phenomenon company in Netflix, and are, the first CEO. And then you start this other company and lots of others that have had varying levels of success and, some maybe lesser success. But like, how do you stack rank these things when you think about the experience you had with Looker versus the experience you had with Netflix or some of these others? Like the financial where Netflix is today is at 500 plus billion in market cap. Do you see that as like a 200-300x the like impact to you and what you got out of it as Lookers at 2 billion and the other things you started that didn't get to the billions? Like how do you sort of put all these things in your own experience?
So the first thing is I had no idea what any of these companies would ever become, and no one could. So it's not like when we started Looker, we're going, oh my God, this is going to be huge, or Netflix. They're no different in your mind than any of the other startups I've done. I mean, some of which crash and burn, and some of which go on to mediocre success. It's impossible to tell. And if you, in fact, had told me at the beginning of any of them, especially at Netflix, so eventually it's going to be $500 billion and it's going to be in every country in the world and they could make their own move. Never in a million years would I have come up with that or believed that could possibly be true. So it's more this happy wonderfulness that some of them went on to such great things and some didn't. And for all of them, the thrill of it, and I'm being completely honest here, the thrill of Looker and Netflix is not that much different or better than the thrill of the other ones that didn't go on to have that measure of lasting impact.
How is that?
I think it's because that's not why I did it, nor is that what I wanted to get out of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. The economic success is a wonderful thing. And it certainly affords me the opportunity to have a lot of flexibility and freedom in my life, and I can do a lot of things that I certainly couldn't have done if I hadn't had 2 mega hits. But in terms of the emotional satisfaction from it, it doesn't come from having gotten a reward, because that reward was not commensurate with the difficulty. That reward was not commensurate with me doing something right. Some of them just happen to hit a sweet spot and some don't. The things that I wanted, I got out of all of them. I wanted to all but one of them. I wanted to sit around the table with really smart people and solve really interesting problems. And I wanted to learn a lot along the way. And every startup I did gave me that in a totally different way. And that's the part that I look back on and go, God, that was so cool. Netflix could have gone so many different ways and it would not have changed
your experience
at all. For example, if we had sold Netflix to Blockbuster a week after I left.
Which you tried to do at one point.
But if I tell you, a week after I left, Netflix wouldn't be around, or it would be called Blockbuster. But it's not like my experience would have been different. It would have been a zero market cap company now.
Yes.
What I'm good at and what I love is these early stages of the companies. I imbue them with certain characteristics that do, I think, help them grow up to be good adults. But the fun part was, getting there, not what the end result looks like.
How do you define your personal success?
I'll give you 2 different ways. I think about it a lot. What I've really genuinely felt forever was that if you can spend your life doing something that you really love doing and that you're good at, you've made it. The economic piece, yeah, you need to be able to afford to put food in your mouth, you need to have a roof over your head and stuff like that. But, and I don't want to diminish those, but boy, if you can set yourself up every day, get to love going to work and be doing something that you really feel competent at, oh my God, that is such a success. I can't imagine it. And when I think about what I've really, I won't say tried to imprint on my children, I mean, believe I have imprinted on my children, was not about entrepreneurship and tech. It's about dad loved going to work. Work was not something that felt like that you could see that he was miserable having to go out the door every morning. Or no, I've loved almost I've never not wanted to go to work in the morning. And the fact that I managed to do that for 45 years, wow. God, I can't ask for more than that.
Is that because of you wanted them to see how your creativity and energy to something could be positive? Or was it because you were doing something that you were excited about, it actually made you a better father and better person to be around, and so it had an impact on them that way?
All those are both true, but it isn't like I wake up in the morning and go, okay, put on the big smile because your kids are watching. It's in reverse. It's looking back. Like, for example, a lot of our friends would go to my wife and go, gosh, Mark's after the IPO, Mark, I left Netflix. He goes, he's home a lot. Aren't the kids gonna lose their motivation to, or I don't know what they're scared of. And we're going, no, if anything, it's the opposite. They're all fired up because they see that what fulfillment in someone's life can look like. And it does not mean he gets to play golf every day. It's like he comes home excited and talking about what he did and the cool problem and, oh, how are we going to get out of this? And that's what people all want, that feeling in life. But it'd be remiss, the bigger definition of success, and I've talked about this a bunch recently, is, ever since I was maybe 30 years old, I have been focused on balance. It's been a bigger objective for me than almost anything else I've set as an objective in my life, which is not letting the work I was doing consume me. It was realizing, luckily, early on in my early 30s, that there were two other very important things. And I love working. I mean, in my 20s, worked all the time, 7 days a week, early morning, late at night. And not because I had a boss, but because I was so fascinating and interesting, the things I was doing. Just wanted to do more of it.
It fulfilled you.
Fulfilled me, 100%. Loved it. Disappointments at all, the whole thing. I still have that in me. But I also, at the time, was living with my girlfriend, now my wife, and maybe she gave me a few hints that this was perhaps not the ingredients for a successful relationship. And I also realized that every time Outside Magazine would show up in the mail, it would depress me.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, and that's not an overnight, but a gradual realization, I got to do something about this. But if I'm really going to maintain a relationship with my girlfriend, if I'm really going to, be able to stay connected with my friends, I didn't have family. That family. I said, I've got to design a life here that works, even though this entrepreneurship thing is an all-consuming mistress. It'll take all the time I give it and keep asking for more. So I've got to figure out something different here. And I've been working on that for about 37 years now. And still working on hacks to get better at it. But I think, and I'll give you the classic hack, and I've certainly told this story before, so pardon me, but one of the hacks we had was before starting Netflix, I had this thing where I go every Tuesday, 5 p.m., I am leaving the office. Wife's getting a sitter if we have kids, and we're going to go out and have a date night. No distractions, no phones, nothing. And that was religious. And, you know, if there was a crisis, we're going to wrap it up by 5. You got to speak to me. You need to meet me. We're going to meet.
Everybody knows everybody expects what's going to
in
happen.
the way of the car. And as you know from having done startups, that's really hard because you always feel you've got to deal with stuff when it comes up. And I said, no, I am resolute. This is an unbreakable pact with myself. But the amazing thing is, like most habits, after 2 or 3 months, it's like magic. The crises stop happening after 5, and the meetings.
It was okay.
It was okay. And more importantly, so many of us get up, go, it's really important. We're in this is a marathon, not a sprint. It's important we all spend time taking. But what I was doing is walking the walk, and I was modeling the behavior, not just talking about it. And to my great delight, people also began carving out space to take care of the things they had to take care of. And the other things I mentioned before, I was an outdoors guy. And unfortunately, my habit was not carving Civil War soldiers, which I could do at night in the attic. I was wanting to go mountain biking and backcountry skiing and climbing, and you can't squeeze that in between the 11 o'clock phone call and the 1 o'clock meeting. And if I was going to continue to have that in my life, I had to design a life that could accommodate all 3 of those things. Anyway, it's a long story to say, I've been working on that for 37 years. So when you say, what does success look like to me? So certainly, you know, I've done 7 startups, you know, and I've had 4 IPOs. I did 2 of them multi-billion-dollar market caps. But the success for me is not doing that, because you've spoken to hundreds of entrepreneurs, hundreds of successful business people who had similar levels of success. But success for me is I was able to do that while staying married to the same woman the whole time, by having my kids grow up knowing me,
Liking you.
and liking me, having them every day see someone who was displaying balance in their life, who was present for them, and I'm proud of the fact that I was able to do all those things and still get out and surf all the time and mountain bike and climb. And so success for me is the fact that I was able to demonstrate it's possible to do all those things together. So looking back, I go, holy crap, I can't believe I think I pulled that off.
I've heard this entrepreneur named Ryan Smith, who started Qualtrics and now owns the Utah Jazz. The way he's described it is that unicorn founders, the true unicorns, are the ones that are able to scale their business and their life at the same time.
Yeah.
And I was just speaking with someone recently who's very connected in Silicon Valley, and they basically said a large majority of the people that he knows that are very successful have not enacted a strategy to scale these things together. And as a result of not having a good strategy, this other side has kind of fallen out as the work stuff has kind of taken over. So to hear you talk about this sort of being very intentional about it, and you've written extensively about it, it's really inspiring. I've been married 20 years almost, and it feels like God bless my wife, and any entrepreneur's wife who deals with the things. That's who we should be interviewing probably is our wives, of how they
Might have a different view of things.
This is not good. I just see so many people get to the end of these journeys and they usually fail. 98% of venture-backed companies fail. So like you get to the end and it fails, and you've put 100% of your energy in this one part of your life, and then it's gone. And it gives you nothing back. And then all this other stuff that you could have done that's actually free, you haven't spent any time on. And you are kind of left in this really difficult place.
That's a really great, I like that expression about, you need to be successful in both, be building both parts of your life. But it's, I'd also smile a little bit at the idea you spend all this time and the company goes away and you're left with nothing. And being left with nothing depends entirely about what you're taking from it along the way. And if your sole definition of why am I doing this and what am I getting out of it, what am I putting into it is what happens at the end, you're right. 98% of the time, you're left with nothing. If every day you go, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but this is so cool, no one can take that away from you. And that's what we were talking about at the beginning. That's what I've tried. That's why I do it. I do not do it for the outcome. I do it for, it's so trite, but not the journey. The destination's the journey. And that's trite and overused because it's kind of true.
We're taught to just go outwork everybody. And I am very guilty of this. And you have said something that is kind of the contrarian view, which is that hard work in some ways is a myth. I understand. I'd love to hear about how you balance, putting your whole energy into something versus.
All right, I got to tell two different stories about this. The first is that balance, and again, I'm really proud of having balance in my life, depends upon how you measure balance. I do not say every day I need to spend time with my family and get out and go for a long bike ride and make huge progress. I don't measure it on a daily. I measure it basically on maybe every week, maybe 2 weeks. I go over a 2-week period, how did I do? That's a huge luxury. If you have an early stage company, you may have to measure it on a quarterly basis because for 3 weeks of the quarter, you were out raising a round, or a yearly basis because for 3 months of the year, you were raising a round, or you're going through M&A, or you can't, you've got to respond to the realities of the circumstance. And it's perfectly okay to debalance as over a longer period of time than daily or weekly. And I'll argue that if you're young, if you are in your 20s, you may be measuring balance over a decade. Yeah. Because I use the analogy, actually very appropriate. I did triathlons a lot when I was younger. And back then they didn't do stage starts. They did mass start. So you'd have 400, 500 people all plunging in the water simultaneously. It's a shit show. Everyone's on top of each other and you're getting your goggles kicked off and you're being held underwater. And what you quickly learn is you better sprint for those first 300 or 400 meters to get yourself out into some clear water. And I think in a lot of ways that, and then you settle into a pace you can sustain for the rest of the swim. And I think that careers are like that too. When you're young, you got to prove yourself. You don't know anything, so you're not efficient. So yeah, you got to work all the time. You got to work harder than anybody else. But the trap you fall into is that trap that says, I'll rest later. And all of a sudden you're 69 or 70 years old and you're ready to retire, and now you can't do all the shit that you planned on doing when you stop. So there's that. The other one, and probably the more apropos story, is that I worked in Europe for a bit more than a year. I lived in Paris. I was running marketing for a big software company. And I was visiting our branches 3 or 4 days a week. So I'd get in the car, drive to the airport, fly to Munich, fly back that night. Next day, I'd fly to Milan and fly back that night. Go to London, fly back. So a lot of time in the airport. And a lot of time playing it fast and loose with how much time I left. And find myself more often than not running through the airport. Jesse Owens, who's another old example.
I have literally ran through those airports. So you're talking, very relatable.
So and all of a sudden at some point it dawned on me as I, pulled up once again to the gate and found that the flight had been delayed by half an hour. And I'm in my wool overcoat, sitting in the seat, marinating in my own sweat. How futile this running was. That half the time you get there and you would have made it anyway. The other half the time, you pull up to the gate and the plane is taxiing away. And you realize, for the 100 times run for a plane, maybe it makes a difference once. And I vowed I'm never going to run for an airplane again. And I never have run for an airplane again. And it has not impacted my life one bit. And the analogy here is that most business people spend an awful lot of time running for airplanes. They are up until 2 a.m, going through the presentation and fixing the fonts, or they're dotting all these I's and T's and doing all this other things to try and get to this level of perfection. And so much of it has zero impact on the ultimate end result. Because at least an early stage company, the end result usually hinges on 1 or 2 variables. It's not based on perfection. It's based on focusing on a few key things and getting them right. And if you get them right, everything else can be shoddy and it's going to be fine. And you don't lose the deal because the fonts were wrong. You lose the deal because the key structure was wrong and you should have fixed that 3 weeks ago. And once you realize that, you go, the world is not going to end when I leave at 5 p.m. The world is not going to end when I take a Friday off so I can get a full 3 days, so I can get off the grid. As long as I'm really disciplined about thinking about what are the key things I have to get right and get them right.
Beautifully said. I literally, a week ago, ran from Burbank. Yes. And it's like, I know it's coming. And I just like in jeans and it's hot. And I got there in that exact thing. And it's just like, your plane is not leaving. Like the doors aren't even open. And I am just, it's all pouring down. And I have nowhere to hide it. And it's like, everyone's like, what has this guy got in his bag? Like, why is he so nervous?
But there is confidence. It requires such confidence because you get out of your car and you go, I'm not sure I'm going to make it. And so
it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay. And so you just got to walk calmly. And then but the same, it's like anything that it's practiced. And after you've done it enough, you go, see,
yeah,
that fear was unwarranted.
And it also goes to just, there's a lot of things that we worry about or we create these big scary things about, and it's actually, we need to just relax. And it's like, it's out of my control. I need to accept it, and it's gonna be okay.
The one truth that I probably hold the dearest is that there's a power curve in what influences the outcome of a startup, which is that the most important thing is 50 times more important than the second most important thing. And the second most important thing is 50 times more important than the third. And it curves out from there, which is that the effort going into those last 70% or 80% is so much more valuable being ported to getting the first or the second one right. And that the skill, if I have to look back and go, what am I good at? What am I innately good at? It's probably I have a very good intuition for what those 1 or 2 things are. And I have incredible discipline to ignore all the other crap so I can focus on those 1 or 2. Even though they're yelling and screaming and fires are burning and people are calling out pain, my intuition goes, this is the thing I have to get right. And I'm going to make sure that's right. And now I'll get philosophical here. Slice Swift. It's very strange sometimes because I genuinely believe I'm no different than anybody else. That I've been incredibly lucky in my life. That I don't have any startup abilities or any different. Anybody could do this. there is a cognitive dissonance that I have a success rate which is dramatically higher than other people.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think it's what I just told you. I think I have a very good intuition about what it is that's important, and I have the discipline to be able to stick. I trust my intuition enough to stick to it. There's a whole bunch of other. Well, culturally, a lot of the things I do, people want to work for me. The honesty.
Attract talent. You're able to attract great people.
And get a lot out of them.
Yeah.
They really like work, and it's not because of nap pods and kombucha and all that. It's about a way of treating people and empowering, giving them agency and being fun, and that's just who I am. But I think the bigger one is that's as a startup talent, and I suck at big companies, by the way, just so you know.
Probably not, but Vinod Khosla says if you're gonna put all your energy into something, you might as well be something that has a big potential. And I've definitely felt that, and I've had things, I've worked exactly as hard on all of the ideas and startups that I've worked on, the same. And 5 of them were complete failures. And then 2 of them, have had a chance to succeed. And it's like, well, it was different. It's like, it wasn't my work ethic. It was, I think these are the things that you're saying of like, that you've been very disciplined about always making sure you have, and I necessarily maybe haven't, but it's like when those things were right, hey, customers really want this, hey, they'll really pay for this, hey, we have the right business model, hey, we have something that VCs will back, or the customers are willing to pay enough that we can bootstrap it. Like when you have the right components in the beginning, everything just flows so much easier than if you miss those, then you're just like swimming upstream for the next 5 or 10 or however many years you're going into it.
Yeah. And I disagree with Khosla, by the way, that I think this is all things being equal.
Yeah.
If you know which ones are going to have a big impact, work on those. But I would say that I would weight other factors way higher, and I'd rather have something I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
And have it be small than something that bores me and is going to be huge and it impact.
Outside of family, who's the human being you most admire?
So Richard Branson, okay? And he seems to be another person who balances that same 3-legged stool that I try to do and kind of crushes me on a bunch of them. He also is an entrepreneur, and holy crap, he's done some pretty
Big success.
Big successes there. Big in terms of getting out and feeding the rat, as we call it in the mountaineering trade, which is, and we more than me, he's like ballooning across around the world, and
yes,
he's incredibly joie de vivre in terms of getting out and doing stuff, and still married to the same person, still has strong relationships with his friends and his family, just loves being around people. And I go, okay, there's a model that you can make it work.
If you could implant one idea into everyone in the world, what would it be?
That if you really want something, you should try to make it happen. That most of the barriers you think are there are probably not. And you'll only realize that once you start.
What's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
Walking away from the work as often as I do. It's really hard. I mean, I'm not sure how hard people will think that is, but when you're in this business and people need to speak to you and being able to saying no, that's the encapsulation of what the hardest thing I have to do all the time is. I hate saying no. I'm a pleaser. And to get balance in your life, you have to say no a lot. And I don't like that.
What accomplishment are you most proud of?
Oh, clearly the fact that I was able to start the companies, have the success, but still have a life. I'm really, really proud of that.
If you die and you meet God, what do you hope he says to you?
You see, Mark, you should have had a more open mind. I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
So I think the whole God thing is ridiculous. So if in fact I met him, all I can say is have him not say I told you so, but to go
Empathy.
Yeah, empathy, which I'm sure he would, or she would, or they would. Is that, here's something that you were firmly believing was not true, and it was true. And you should take something from that.
And finally, what's the biggest impact you hope to make on the world?
I think it's funny. It's not like change the way the world consumes movies. No. I think there's so much written and said about entrepreneurship. I think it's been so glorified. I think the thing that people should take away is that it is possible to be successful, using the external definition of successful, and still have the other things that are important in their life. That it is not a net sum game, but you can have all these things if you're willing to make that a priority.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Really appreciate it. Sun came out for us. Look at that. It's beautiful.
Divot.
On next week's episode,
Love and truth are inextricably connected. If I really love someone, I have to be honest with them. And if I want to be honest, I have to really care about them.